Joel Hunt for inviting me to join today. I went to Bethel University where I did an undergraduate degree in communication and development studies. Then I went to the University of Denver where I got my master's in international development. I am a foreign service officer for the State Department, so I'm a US diplomat, and my current role, which I am starting tomorrow, is at the United Nations. So the US mission to the UN, I will be the special assistant to our ambassador there.
I'm super excited to learn more what that means. Thank you.
I can go next. My name is Maria Lee. I use she, her pronouns, and I went to school at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. I graduated in 2016, so a little bit ago, but not that long ago. I was a geography major, but my joke is that I was a nice, well-rounded liberal arts major because I didn't really know what that meant when I was in the program. And I currently work for I've been at the City of Minneapolis in the Civil Rights Department for the last 3 years. I'm in our Civil Rights Equity Division. I think my role, my actual title there is something very government, like Administrative Analyst 1. But yeah, I get to work across all 4 of our enforcement areas, and I also staff the Urban Scholars Program. So a mix of stuff. But yeah, excited to share more.
Thank you for being here today.
And hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here, and along with our lovely panelists, I'm happy for the opportunity. My name is Minette Salag, and I went to school at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. I graduated in spring 2018, and I majored in sustainable systems management, which was kind of like a hybrid interdisciplinary major that was sustainability studies, environmental science, and then some business thrown in. So pretty recent graduate, I guess. I spent 1 year in the Minnesota Green Corps, which is an AmeriCorps program, doing some environmental sustainability work, and that was with a city here in the Twin Cities, and I'm currently doing a fellowship with the Ramsey County Environmental Health Division, which is in the Department of Public Health. And my title is technically Environmental Health Specialist, but my role is more special projects across all of the different teams in the division, working in a ton of different areas on different projects with residents and within the county that they've been wanting to pursue and maybe just don't have the staff or the capacity to do that. And so I get to step in and work in a lot of different really cool areas. So I'm excited to share a little more as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, so super excited to have each of our 3 panelists. Thank you for being here. And we're excited to hear what you're doing today. But if we start by like bringing it all the way back to our college experience, if we could start with the first question being, how did you land on the particular major? Because we do have a breadth of different majors on the line. Was it something you knew you wanted to do, or you more have stumbled on it? And then like, how did you navigate deciding where you went from that major? Whoever would like to go first.
I guess I can go because, well, so I was also a 2014 Wallin Scholar. I went to St. Paul Central. And while I was there, my senior year, I took an AP Environmental Science class, and I loved it. Like, I loved learning about that topic and everything. And I went to the U of M, and I was convinced I wanted to do the major that's called Environmental Sciences, Policy and Management. And I tried a couple of different tracks at different areas of the major, and didn't feel like it was quite right or like what I was expecting. And it just didn't feel like a fit, but I didn't know what to do because I felt like I'd kind of chosen and I didn't really know what else I would switch into. And so I was working with my advisor at Wallin, who was Jerry Clark Wagner at the time. And she really talked to me about, oh, like, what are you interested in and everything, because I didn't really go through that process of thinking about it. I just felt like, oh, here's something I like. It makes sense for me to want to major in it. And of course, going through that experience didn't feel the same. Like, I wasn't feeling like that was what I was expecting. And so we did some exploration, and I found out that sustainable systems management was only offered my sophomore year, but I didn't know about it until I really started looking. And before I decided on that, I was like, oh, do I transfer to the Carlson School for Business, or do I transfer to the Science and Engineering School for more just something more technical? Like, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. But you know, I worked with her and was able to explore that, and that's what I found was a really good fit for me, because it combined all of those interests and kind of all of the applied concepts and things that I was interested in and that I wanted to further study. And so for me, it was, yep, I switched majors, and it took a little while for me to figure out what I wanted to really stick with. So.
I can go next. I think I had no idea what I wanted to do everything when I started undergrad. I was taking theater courses because I thought maybe I wanted to do like theater, like management stuff, because that was a big part of my like high school experience. I was really involved with our theater programs. And as like I took those courses, I was like, wow, like not my thing at all. I think the first major that I declared was in park recreation and leisure studies, and my parents were not thrilled that I was going to college for leisure studies. They were like, that's not a thing, Maria. And yeah, I like read course descriptions and was consistently drawn to geography, just because of like the way that geographers think. A lot of times people ask me like, oh, like I bet you know every like capital and state. And I'm like, it's actually not that. There's a lot of different facets of geography that I found really interesting, and like how ideas need to be like in system with like land and place. And I just got to explore a ton of different ideas that I found really exciting. And I didn't really know where that was going to take me. I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin, and cashed in on some pretty sweet in-state tuition reciprocity to come to the University of Minnesota. And I had like all these ideas about like, you know, land and like rural communities and urban communities and like how they were connected. And I met a lot of professors who were like, yeah, Maria, like those ideas are really exciting and like our geography questions, right? So that's really kind of where I found a home in my department. I also ended up minoring in my like initial major, which was outdoor recreation and leisure studies. I also have a minor in forestry, and I was like interested in parks and public land are part of government, which kind of like set me on the government career path. So most of my internships were with government in undergrad, which is like why I work in government today, definitely. So yeah, I just explored a lot of things and had no idea what I wanted to do, but just like found people who were excited about the same ideas that I was excited about.
So I majored in communication studies, and I chose it because I was on a speech team in high school and really loved it. And I went to Bethel because I got a scholarship to be on their speech and debate team. And so I honestly, I didn't have a lot of input from family or friends. My mom and her two sisters were the first generation to go to college, and they were all nurses and teachers because that was the only option for women. So I didn't really know about all the different options out there. So when I found out that like, oh, wow, I could study speech and I love giving speeches and I love communication. Great, let me do that. So I started on that, and then through internships and through debate, actually realized I'm very interested in international policy and development. So that's when I added the major of international development, and then I focused for my graduate studies on international development.
Once again, I'm just loving the variety or breadth of the backgrounds that we have from communications, geography, and environmental science. So as today we're talking about government and public policy, this idea of civil service, was that something that you each knew, you know, you wanted to be a part of? Maria, you talked about it ended up being a natural landing spot, you know, related to geography, but would be curious in terms of your roles today and as you look to your futures, how does that play into your goals?
Sure. So my first job out of graduate school was actually at the FBI in Minneapolis at their field office. I was a So I graduated graduate school in 2008, and I think there are a lot of similarities between 2008 and 2020 because the economy was crashing. Everything, I thought that I wanted to work for an international NGO. That's what I wanted to do. And no NGOs were hiring because no one had money. So the government was still hiring. And I never thought in a million years I would work for the FBI. Well, actually I did when I was like 7, which my mom loves reminding me. But they advertised for recent graduates. I interviewed, I got the job. I worked on the Horn of Africa task force, which was in line with my interest, strangely. So all that to say, I didn't have government exactly on my horizon. I thought that it would come later in my career, but at a time of economic downturn, it was a very good place to land. And I loved it. I had a great time. After 3 years, though, I decided to leave government. I worked for NGOs in Africa and the United Kingdom, but I really missed government. And why I missed it was several things. One is that there's an infrastructure of mentoring and training that I couldn't find in NGOs. And secondly, which is very important to me, and it's an honest question everyone needs to take seriously, is in government, there's a career ladder for you. There's a way to keep going up, to have new positions, to get promoted, all of those things that actually I found very motivating. And while I was working in an NGO, I realized my only option was either the job I had or my boss's job. And my boss was probably going to stick around for 20 years. So I didn't have many options to take her job, and she was doing a great job. So I needed a place where I could have upward mobility, and I also sort of like competition and interviewing for jobs. So State Department was perfect for me because how it works is diplomats usually work at one post for 2 to 3 years, and then you apply and move to another job. So that was just a good fit for me. It can be very stressful for other people, but once you're in the government system, you have a lot of ways to move between jobs and positions and even different government agencies, which I really like.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question. No one in my family, like no one's even like I know veterans, and like even in my family, like the idea of public service is just like my dad grew up in Taiwan and immigrated to the United States, and he had like mandatory public service as just like all young men have to in Taiwan, and like that's kind of like it wasn't like this idea of like service to community through working in government was not something that I grew up with at all. And really, I did a lot of research on parks and protected areas in undergrad, and I ended up working at a couple different levels of government through undergrad and like early career, both with like the federal government, so like the National Park Service and like the US Forest Service. And I got some experience with like federal government, and I started like to piece together these like through parks, like these different layers of government. And so also ended up working at like a state regional level with our Department of Natural Resources and state parks. And I was like, oh, okay, like this is like, you know, a little bit smaller than the federal government. Like, how is it different? And now working in city government, local government, this is absolutely my favorite like level of government that I've ever worked at. A little bit different from what Faith had mentioned about her experience in government. The city of Minneapolis is like, it's a big city, but also a relatively small city, and the Civil Rights Department is relatively small. So definitely like once you're in the city, it's much easier. Like there's all these like secret jobs that you can apply to as like an internal applicant that like outside the system is just like a general applicant you can't see. And there's like a pretty, there's quite a bit of job security in government, even as we're going through like a almost $200 million budget deficit at the city of Minneapolis right now. As like we're going through like cuts and like furlough stuff, it's like most of my colleagues, we feel like pretty secure with our like union representation, et cetera. So like there's a level of security that feels pretty nice. And yeah, but I love local government. It's like you can really see, I think for myself, I can really see how relationships influence like what is happening in the city that I live in. So being both a resident of the city that I work for is fascinating. Like I love like walking around my neighborhood and seeing like the public works folks like out doing their thing, like repairing potholes. I'm like, those are my colleagues, like this is happening. And like being able to like just like know who they're like there's something about those relationships and seeing how the work is actually being done. And for me, maybe at the time, maybe if I went back to state or federal government now, I'd be a little more prepared for it. But at the time when I was in these like larger systems, I just felt so removed from the top. And like and I didn't understand the chain of how decisions and influence worked, or there was just so much distance between the top and where I was that I felt like limited influence in my roles. And so yeah, local government just felt really, really effective for me. I'm gonna stop rambling now. I'm not sure if that completely answered your question, but those are like the ideas that like really like sparked in my head when thinking about like this idea of like public service. I also just like in the civil rights department, like my colleagues are some of the like most like mission driven people that I've ever met. Like the people that I work with are not coming in to work every day because they just need a paycheck. Like they truly care about the work and they truly care about the residents of Minneapolis and want to create better outcomes for the residents of Minneapolis. I find that deeply inspiring to work with such committed folks.
Yeah, I want to echo what Maria was saying about, being a resident, also working, and that like that's my experience too. I live in Ramsey County, but in my work, I've also, worked on programs that my parents use, like to drop off their yard waste and all these things. So it does make the work feel really real to me. But to go back to Matt's question, I didn't really expect to be in the public sector or in public service relatively soon after graduating from my undergrad. In college, I was always looking at internships with like the big companies and everything, and it just never seemed to work out. And keeping in mind too that the major area that I was in was very, it doesn't feel like a long time ago, but at the time, like even just a few years ago, that's how quickly it's been emerging. It's very niche kind of area. It was, like I would go up to employers at career fairs, like private sector employers, and tell them about like my skills and this cool area that I'm in. And they're like, oh, that's really cool, but we don't really have a position like that, or maybe it's integrated in like sourcing or something like that. And so it was really difficult for me to figure out where I could make myself fit and what areas I could look at. And so at some point I just kind of started focusing on my skills and, how I understand like this big picture of everything and how things are connected. And so I applied for a lot of those opportunities and they didn't work out. And what I noticed as I was nearing graduation was a lot of the work that I was looking for, not necessarily the position title or, all of that stuff on paper, but the work and the skills and the things that I could bring to a position, I was finding in a lot of city and county government positions that I was finding. But then at the same time I graduated and I was going through some life things and I was thinking, oh my gosh, I need some time off just to, I was so burnt out and everything. And so that's why I ended up in that Minnesota Green Corps position, which I think that's what really solidified the idea of public service and being in the public sector is through that experience. And so I'm not sure if everyone's aware, and it's really big in like local, city and county, and then nonprofits like in the state. But it's Minnesota Green Corps, which is an AmeriCorps program. So I know some people compare it to like the domestic Peace Corps almost, but the idea is that you're in the communities, you're serving them, you're working on projects that they otherwise might not be able to. And it just so happens that this one is more environmental and sustainability. So that aligned with what I was studying. And I got paired with the city. That was great at really developing me and kind of instilling that, like, you can see your work impacting the lives of the people that live here, and like how your work directly kind of like what you do is important to them for these reasons and things like that. And I never really got that when I was in college, and seeing, oh, all my friends with their flashy internships and stuff, which is great. I mean, that wasn't the path for me. And as I was going through that experience, I kind of realized, like, this is what I am looking for in a job, and this is what makes me feel fulfilled and like what I'm looking at. And it feels very like premature almost for me to say that, because it's only been like 2 years since I graduated. But I find that I am very happy, like being in the position that I'm in, even if I wasn't expecting to do so. And the network, I think, is incredible. I guess one of the other benefits that I found, like I'm at Ramsey County now because of the work that I kind of did and the people that I met, just being in the same circles of like, oh, you know, the city works with the county on this program, and being able to kind of meet people that way. And so when the opportunity came up, they were like, oh, like, you know, we know that your position's only 11 months, and if you're looking, like, here's something you might be interested in. And so it definitely, I just really enjoy being a part of that and really seeing my work matter for reasons other than, oh, you know, we have a calendar to kind of follow and a timeline and just other factors that don't align so well with myself and my personality. So I would say it's been a pretty good match so far, and we'll see where it takes me. So.
Yeah, I love it. Well, we all thank you, because it really is, you know, civil service. And I think so often on the national scale, you know, stage, government is scrutinized, and locally, I think we're just not present in that conversation. So I think it's important you're each sharing about the benefits at like various levels, from mentoring and training to job security to having staff that cares about their job, that's mission driven, that's there and showing up. And we're, you know, then as a public hearing about the nuances and complexities of solving challenges. So if I'm an individual that's interested, we've talked about the various levels of local and more like the national and like international development. If I want to break into that area, how can I start as a student? What are the experiences that prepare students for opportunities? And then what are typical entryways? Don't all jump at once.
Well, there's this program called the Urban Scholars Program that is ran out of the Civil Rights Department of the City of Minneapolis, and I staff that program. The last 2 years, I've hired about 50 undergraduate and graduate students to work at the city. In the last couple of years, our cohorts have been like around 120 students, and we place students with the city, Hennepin County, state of Minnesota, couple other jurisdictions in there, but we really focus on like what are the skills that young people need to succeed in public sector, but then also the systemic work of like how do workplaces need to shift and change to make sure that young people of color can be successful in these workplaces, because we know that y'all aren't the problem. It's like these super white workplaces that are that have a lot of room to grow in terms of culture. And yeah, the program's great. Would be happy to, I'm sure we'll share contact information at the end of this, would be happy to tell folks more about it, but the application typically opens in January. And we, work with like 2-year degree students, 4-year degree students, graduate students. So internships are definitely a great way to get into government. What Minette said about AmeriCorps, I'm an AmeriCorps alum. That's how I worked at the state of Minnesota, was through an AmeriCorps program. And also how I worked with, I was like AmeriCorps funded when I worked at the U.S. Forest Service. So AmeriCorps opportunities are great. And I think like AmeriCorps alumniship goes a certain distance in when you're applying for government jobs, just because like it shows that you've like kind of like paid your dues in a way. And like Minette said, like, you know, this like belief in public service gets kind of like demonstrated through different things like Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, like military service, etc. Others?
I know that at Ramsey County, I think it's more targeted towards high schoolers maybe, but we have a program that's to immerse students who are interested in public sector to kind of like spend a couple weeks at a department or something like that. I guess I don't have anything super specific, but something I will say that based on my observations is there is, at least, you know, with my county, I can't speak for others, but I know there's a huge push for like younger talent. And I think there's this like idea that, you know, people go to government after they're done, you know, being in the private sector and working super long hours. They need to like raise their kids and have more like work-life balance and things like that, all of which do allow for those things. But I mean, there's been this push in my department to hire, like try to attract and hire younger, talented people, especially people of color. And I think that's like a really great opportunity these days, because I think, you know, I'm not alone in my experience, and that feeling like that pressure to, oh, like when we graduate, we need to have this private sector thing under our belt that we can like show as our first job or whatever. Because I know myself and some of my friends really felt that. But there's tons of opportunities. I think internships, I know we're big on internships. We do a graduate internship and a high school. I think they have high school internships and undergrad. And we do partner with a lot of different organizations. I know like the Science Museum of Minnesota, they have this STEM internship that we have gotten involved with, and it kind of provides exposure as well. And so I'm happy to dig up these things. I just off the top of my head, I know that even my position, the fellowship, I'm not actually there permanently. I'm only there for 2 years in this capacity, and I started back in September. But that program was established to bring more, to intentionally bring in like younger professionals into the environmental field specifically, because it's a program for our division. But you know, really emphasizing like we're not even looking at people with graduate degrees. It's really to like expose more and more younger graduates and people who might be interested in this area that are not traditionally served by you know, like a government structure that's ours, that's been so predominantly white or not historically diverse. And we do serve the most diverse county in the state of Minnesota, and that's a really big deal for them. So.
And that, what you said also made me think about how government internships are often posted way before you think they would be. Like our application for a summer, like the Urban Scholars Program runs in the summer, so it starts in like May, June, and goes till August. But our application like closes in early February. And I think, yeah, like just like the time scale of like most government internships that I've seen are like much earlier than you anticipate them. So just like, yeah, think ahead, like in that like first fall semester, start like looking like the end of fall semester, like spring break, not spring break, winter break. Use your winter break to look for, to start to really look for and start applying to summer internships.
Yes, so the Foreign Service is an exam-based entry process, and which is amazing on one hand, because it doesn't mean you need to know anyone, and it doesn't even mean you have to have a certain set of credentials. Some of my colleagues were news reporters or stay-at-home moms or straight out of undergrad. That having been said, yes, we have a huge problem at State Department of lacking diversity and lacking women. The old adage we use is pale male Yale, and that is hopefully starting to change. We are trying to get more diversity in the schools that we recruit from, the backgrounds that people have. So please, I am asking everyone in this group, if you're interested at all in the Foreign Service, start taking the test early. It's a tough test, but all of you here can have the skills to pass it, because what you need to pass it is someone who loves to read, someone who looks into news, someone who has a general good, often liberal arts education, doesn't have to be though, just someone who's well read. And the reason I'm telling you to start early is because often it takes people several tries to pass. And you can only take it once per year. And so even if this is something that it might interest you 5 years down the road, it's good to start testing early. I personally, I tested straight out of graduate school, decided it wasn't a good time for me. And so even though I passed it up. I tested again later, I passed again. And this time I put myself on a waiting list just to like make it fit my life needs. The other thing though is that we have 2 fellowship programs, and I'm going to write it in the comments. It's for Wrangell and Pickering fellows. And this is specifically to bring more diversity into the department. And some of these fellowships will actually pay for graduate school, get you internships in the State Department, and get you straight into the program afterwards. So it's something to start looking into as an undergraduate and even right after. As for International work. If you are interested in that, it's important to get international experience. I did a global health corps fellowship. So all of us on here have done a type of kind of like AmeriCorps, Peace Corps. So the Global Health Corps Fellowship is a program that links young professionals, you have to be under 30, with an African partner for the most part. I was placed in Uganda and I worked at the Infectious Diseases Institute for a year, and I was co-partnered with a Ugandan, and her and I did the same job together. It paid me a stipend, it covered my housing, and after that I had phenomenal international experience, which helped me get a job in London at the Salvation Army headquarters, where I worked after that.
I think we're all receiving a lot of different advice. I know I was taking notes, and we're very fortunate to have 3 speakers. If you have questions about the specific opportunities that are mentioned, feel free to type them in the chat bar and we can certainly follow up with that information as well. With that said, we do want to make sure that we're answering your questions. So if you have questions for our speakers, feel free to unmute yourself, ask the question, or type them in the chat bar. Otherwise, I can continue to go through some of the questions that we've planned on. So with that said, what are the aspects of the work world that college did not prepare you for? Whether academically, you know, relational, or just the nuances of professional work.
I feel like understanding benefits. Like I had no, like when I got like my first like job that like had a benefits package, I was like, what's health, like what is this? I just like totally didn't understand like what was good, what was bad, like, and how to weigh the like oh, there's a word for it, but it's like you get paid so much money, but then like your benefits are like, you know, worth so much money too, and like how to like weigh out the pros and cons of like those different offers, and like really like what at a certain, like I think early careers, like you want to pay me any money, amazing, like so cool. And then after like getting some experience, being like, oh wait, like I actually have like valuable skills and talents, and like knowing how much that's worth. Totally underprepared coming out of college to have any conversations like that.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off that. Salary negotiation was nothing I learned about. My first job at a graduate school, I was just like, what? That's amazing. That's the most money I've ever heard of, you know? And I didn't even think at all about salary negotiations, where I know for a fact that some of my male colleagues negotiated and got more than me. And like, this just starts the cycle of women earning 70 cents to the dollar of every man. And I had other friends from college whose fathers told them, like, make sure you're negotiating. And my family, like, my dad was a pastor, my mom worked as a teacher. They were very service oriented. No one was negotiating anything or talking about benefits packages. Like, it was all about service and giving and doing your best, which is amazing. And I thank them so much for that. It just meant I was not prepared to come out on top for what I should, like what I deserved, which is not good.
Yeah, really good points, and I echo all of them, especially about the salary negotiation thing. So I did that for my fellowship, and it was really scary because I didn't know anyone that had done it. And also, I mean, I don't believe that all, you know, government agencies or any level, I don't know that they're all the same, but I know this is true for us, and it was really confusing for me, which was part of the salary negotiation thing. But it's like, I think sometimes you see, oh, like, I'm going to go for this number, but with us, it was like, here's the compensation manual and your position is this number, and here there's like 11 different steps, and that's like your like when you get promoted and whatever, like you just follow those because it's already laid out. And so I wasn't arguing for a number. I was like, oh, well, I think I should start at step 3 instead of step 1. And thankfully I had like I have an amazing supervisor who was like, I didn't say anything when you were doing it, but I'm really proud of you for like negotiating, because I did that for my first like big job after graduating. It was scary, but it worked out. And you know, it did work out too. And so that's super important. I think even doing practice ones in school, sometimes I feel super weird and whatever, because it's just a mock trial, I guess. But even that's really helpful. And I think for me also, because like I mentioned, there is kind of this age, like generational divide, because all of a sudden they're hiring all of these like millennials and stuff, but they're still the people who've been there since the 80s or whatever. And it's definitely interesting. You think about you're in college, and for the most part, maybe you're interacting with, folks who are around the same age as you, similar viewpoints and things like that. And then when you go into the workplace, it's just so unique to everyone's experience, depending on where you work and your job and everything. And that's something that's really interesting, and often it's rewarding, but sometimes it's very like strange to navigate. And so that's something that I felt like I was prepared for, but you just never know until you're where you are and you kind of see who you're working with. So it's just a funny insight that I had gotten from my experience.
Yeah, I appreciate each of you sharing. And I know we got a couple questions in, but I do want to make sure we kind of close this topic out, because as Faith talked about, it is a compounding, especially salary negotiation. So if you'd each be willing to share just whether it was benefits or salary, like what was that process and how has it changed over time as you've gone from role to role in terms of seeking counsel or, looking at external resources to benchmark and make sure, you are a strong self-advocate?
So I'll start. I think that everyone here can do a better job than I did. And I think Minette's story is awesome because I'm so glad that she did that. So when you join government, there's different stages, and you get this much for undergraduate, you get this much for a master's degree, and they put you in this grid. I didn't realize that that was open more to negotiation, and I wish I had. Anyway, what I've done after that is now in the State Department, we compete for promotions. And so I am very intense about my promotionability, I guess you could say. So I work with mentors. I have people read any review statement that I write, and I have people read it. I have a diverse audience read it, but I have people read it who are getting promoted. So unfortunately, previously, that's starting to change, but that meant my pale male Yale colleagues, the ones who were making it to the top. And I was like, how are they writing about themselves? Most of them were writing things like, I saved the world from coronavirus, while I was saying I was a team player who helped evacuate 100,000 people from around the world of coronavirus. So there's a middle ground, right? And the culture is changing, thank goodness. But you have to just put yourself out there and claim everything that you did, and find the balance between teamwork and individualistic. And what I would do is I have several older white male colleagues of mine who have made it very far in the Foreign Service. I have them read it, and I have them say to me, does this sound to you like, so I write it as if I think that I'm bragging way too much. Like, wow, this is just bragging BS. I have them read it and say, have I crossed a line here? And 3 out of 4 times they say no. Like one time they told me to drop an adjective that I had added that I shouldn't put there. So the other item is that for part of our promotionability is based on awards. And so we have a really strong network of Foreign Service women who support each other. And what we've all decided is to put ourselves up for awards, because often this is what men do and women don't. So we came together and we make sure everyone knows when the awards schedule goes out, and you go up to your supervisor and say, look, I did this project X, Y, and Z. I think I deserve an award for it. What do you think? And often the supervisor, who's too overwhelmed and too busy to write out your award package, will just say, sure, Faith, if you write it up, I agree with you, go for it. So it's just like there's so much more self-promotion that you have to do, and it feels very weird, but you just have to force yourself into it, and often it works out.
Yeah, to echo that, I think that's the feedback that we give Urban Scholar interviewees the most is in interviews. It's like, well, we did this. It's like, but what did you do? And really pulling out the, claiming the work that you do. And it's really challenging and it feels awkward. And it's hard. In terms of work pay stuff, I think a lot of how in the city of Minneapolis folks get promoted is like an internal, rather than just like converting someone into like administrative analyst 1 to administrative analyst 2, actually an internally, like your supervisor will get permission to post a job internally, and like it's floated around to the department. It's like, that's Maria's promotion, so it'd be really weird if anyone else applied to it, but like you could if you wanted to, and it's this very weird process. So having a good relationship with your supervisor or the person that has to advocate for you to like be reclassified is, we're using all these like random words like reclassification, step increases, but like this is just kind of like the language of how money and pay works in government. But yeah, having a good relationship with the like the gatekeepers who are ultimately the ones who will have to like move up, either approve what you wrote like Faith said, or like move forward on these opportunities for you to like climb the quote unquote ladder.
I guess I already touched on some of this, but I think the biggest indicator for me, because originally I wasn't going to negotiate because I just felt so weird about it, which is a totally normal feeling. But I saw the posting for the position, and it was like salary pay range, and it was like a $20,000 difference from like the low end to the high end. And I was like, there's no way. Like, and this is before I found out about the step system of how it's kind of broken down. But I was like, there's no way like you can have the same listing for someone who'd make this versus that. And I didn't understand what was behind that. But so, I mean, that's kind of what prompted me. I don't remember the benefits being super on the table just because of, with my position being temporary and stuff, it was more on salary. And I also don't have as much work experience. Like with AmeriCorps, they gave you like a stipend, but that's set, like you don't negotiate anything. But I did leverage the AmeriCorps experience, which is, you know, it really is about taking inventory of like what you've accomplished. It doesn't matter like what position it was, what internship, how long you did it. There might be something that you can pull out of that and really use that for, and also just reading the position super carefully. Like the fellowship wasn't intended to be, oh, you know, like you just graduated, but here I was having a year of some work and, you know, experience under my belt. And so it's like, okay, well, I know that I can differentiate myself, and I just kind of have to craft that argument a little bit. But it really is about just really highlighting. And I got this advice where it was, you're not necessarily bragging about yourself, but you really want to highlight things. And there's kind of that difference when you're preparing what you want to say and how you want to present things. It really comes out as, you know, less about, oh, look at me and like fluff me up because I am so cool and I did all of this stuff, but it's really like, here's what I have done and here's what I've been able to accomplish, and this is what the kind of caliber I want to contribute, and that's why this is justified. So it is a whole process, and I'm definitely still practicing, and we'll see how it continues, but I think it's always worth it to try, because this is something I really struggled with too, was like, what if I negotiate and they think I'm just too difficult because I negotiated, and they're like, actually, we don't want to hire you anymore. But the truth is that, I mean, in just a lot of positions in general, there's so many resources and time and effort that goes into HR and the hiring manager and everyone to look for the ideal candidate. Like, they're not going to let you go because you do have that fair shot of like presenting that case for yourself and advocating for yourself. And so I say it's always worth it. It's not always going to be the best experience, but the more that you do it, I hope the more comfortable that I and others will get with it as well.
Something else I thought of, all public, my pay, like admin analyst 1 at the city of Minneapolis, that pay range is public. Like my boss's pay range is public. Like I know how much all of my colleagues make, and I know like what, like I know the range that they make. I might not know the exact like dollar amount that they make, but that's helpful. Like, and unlike private sector, where that data is like pretty locked down, like you just like know the range that people are making money in. So That's kind of cool. And I'm trying to find where we list that. The city just like switched our website and we've been like getting attacked by like Russian hackers. But as soon as I find this website, I will share it with you all, so you can also look at just like different titles and the like range of income or salaries that are attached to those.
But yeah, I really love so you sharing really about it's this balance of both like self-advocacy of, you know, having that uncomfortable conversation, but you each were also doing the research ahead of time to understand like what that range looks like and what counterparts are at. We had a couple questions came in. Luke had talked about the FBI, and Faith, I saw you shared. Any other follow-up specifically to that? And then want to make sure we're talking about networking as well.
Just real quick, one thing I will mention about the FBI, I was an analyst there, not an agent, and I had a good experience, but all the career opportunities went to the agents. And so I decided that for my next Fed government job, I wanted to be the thing that that agency did. So when I joined State Department, I didn't want to be civil service. I wanted to be foreign service because that's their main. It depends. Usually agent, like analysts, civil servants, these types of jobs in the federal system can be more of experts, right? They can focus on one thing, they can become a subject matter expert and really delve down into that. Agents can too sometimes, but they move around more and they move between squads more. Foreign service officers, we're generalists, so we're hired to do all different types of jobs, of which like I've been a consular officer in Haiti and Canada. I just finished working at the emergency center in Washington, D.C., and I'm headed to the UN to be a staff assistant. So all very different jobs, but I was hired. You're hired because of your capabilities, your intuition. This is why it's a general exam and not a subject matter expert exam. So it's also something to think about which direction you want to go. Do you want to spend a lot of time focused on one topic or issue, or do you want to be someone more who's just generally capable of picking up new skills?
Excellent, thank you. And so one of the other questions that came in was, we talked a little bit about different like career opportunities. In terms of positioning ourselves well for those opportunities, what can we be doing to building up our resume, making sure, you know, we're well positioned in terms of like growing our network where possible, you know, and really having the best shot?
I can go first. So I focused a lot on internships when I was both in college and graduate school, kind of, but also jobs. So I worked at an American Indian reservations during college and graduate school, which gave me, it wasn't international, but it was like youth development and that type of work, and working on development type issues. And so that gave me, although it was domestic, I had some experience to talk about when I wanted an international development job. I also interned in Washington, D.C. for my senator from Nebraska because I thought that maybe I wanted to go into politics. After that, I decided I definitely did not want to go into politics, but it was a very good experience for me. And I had a lot of culture shock when I went to Washington, D.C., which also helped me understand like the broader ramifications of federal government. When I was in graduate school, I did my internship for the United Nations, and how I did this is I basically decided I wanted to work for UNIFEM, which is now UN Women. I wanted to work on women's development. So I just sent my resume to tons of different offices around the world for the UN Women. And I landed a couple, but I chose the one in South Africa in Johannesburg. And I went there. And I had some scholarship from my school, and also it ended up costing less because I was just I was paying for, my housing expenses were cheaper in South Africa than they were in the US. So I was able to swing it, and I saved my money from working when I was back in the US. Anyway, when I got there, they were very short-staffed and basically gave me an office and a set of contracts to manage. Sometimes I think like I still haven't had as much responsibility as I did right then in that internship. So there's kind of different options, right? When I went to Washington, D.C., it was very formal internship, but I was like at the bottom of the barrel answering phone calls of people screaming at me for why they disagreed with my senator, and like answering their email and getting people coffee, literally. Then when I went to the UN, they were so short-staffed that they just let me do the job, which was the best training. So sometimes if you can find that place that like that NGO that really needs you, that's short-staffed, or that agency who just is short-staffed, you'll get a lot more experience, but maybe not as much mentoring. So anyway.
Yeah, I think volunteering came to mind for me, or like really any way that if you can't find internships, any way that you can find opportunities that align with the things that you think that you're interested in now. Like Faith said, like she thought she was interested in politics, like worked in an elected's office and didn't like it. So finding out what you don't like so that you can keep getting opportunities to figure out what you do like. And I think a lot for me going through internships, it was never so much about like there's elements of the work that were more exciting and less exciting, but really figuring out what in a supervisor and what in a team I need to thrive was huge for me. And I think in my jobs on campus, I was student staff for the office that administers all the service learning courses, or courses that have community engagement like embedded into coursework, and had amazing supervisors who were really like development oriented. I was like, oh, my first like out of undergrad job I did not have a supervisor like that, and it was a rude awakening for me. I lived in this like weird little dreamland as like student staff where I had really supportive and like development oriented supervisors. And so so in interviews and moving forward, when I was applying for new jobs, I was like asking a lot of questions about work culture and how, you know, just like what the supervisor saw as their role in terms of developing their employees. And I love my team. I love my supervisor. We like hang out all the time, which is like, I think unlike a lot of my other friends' relationship with their supervisors. But yeah, I think the more, sorry, I'm rambling right now, but I remember my first year of college, I volunteered with the Department of Natural Resources, and just like I was processing like water use data. It was super boring, but in being in the office, I got to see how people interacted with each other, and I got to see the physical environment of like working in the DNR. So then later, when I actually worked in the DNR, I was in the same building. I was like, oh yeah, I remember this. I remember that the lobby's really fancy when you walk in, but the rest of the building isn't like that. And like, you know, wasn't disillusioned by that, and like got to see some of the behind the scenes. So if you find people, either if you're teachers, or if, you know, Wallin Scholars is like doing internships and you hear of someone who's doing work that's interesting to you, like reach out to them, have an informational interview or like a one-on-one, and learn about their work. And if it's something that you're like really interested in and you want to see like more behind the scenes, like they might have some volunteer opportunities, or there might be some projects where you could like shadow. Or I know like in the Civil Rights Department, we always need folks to like help us do like outreach stuff. Like obviously in COVID times, like we're not doing this, but like we are constantly tabling to let people know about like the discrimination complaint process, the our police misconduct reporting process, minimum wage, like all of these things that we enforce. And by volunteering, when you get to know staff, and you would be tabling with staff and have an opportunity to like, you know, chat in like a really like informal setting with people. And also you get to learn about like the work that this department is trying to get out to community. So yeah, there's a lot of different like random opportunities like that. And I cannot stress enough, like the more that you get kind of that like behind the curtain peek at workplaces, the more you're going to learn about what you like in a workplace.
I love it. Thank you. And really just want to affirm as well, doing experiences like this for, you know, every student on the line, this is that sneak peek. And, you know, these are speakers that are giving of their time. And so, you know, take advantage of that opportunity, whether it's asking questions, thanking and following up, connecting on LinkedIn or various, email are all great ways to connect and build your network. We do have just a couple minutes left. Would love, as closing words to everyone, if you would share, like, looking back from, where you're at now, what advice would you give yourself in college, and, share out to our students?
I can go first for this one. I think sometimes when you're in the middle of it, like I felt this all the time, but always worrying about what I should be doing and kind of like comparing to experiences of people around me and whatever. And like looking back, I can see that I am where I am because I kind of just followed my instinct and, like, obviously accepted people's input and everything, but at the end of the day, I made the decision that I felt was best. And I think sometimes, especially when you're in school and there's so many things to worry about, and like the future and where you're going to end up, it's really easy to get caught up in that. And I know it doesn't feel like much of a comfort probably to folks who are still like in the middle of it with all the uncertainty and everything, but really taking the time to think about what you're interested in and what feels right to you and what you like, your vision for yourself, and what you think you can do to get there, because everyone is so capable, and of course being able to seek out those opportunities that are a good fit, it usually really does work out. And if it doesn't work out the best, like, you're still taking really valuable experience and knowledge so that you can kind of keep yourself going on that path for what's going to happen. And so I'm happy with how things ended up. And it wasn't like the easiest, and it wasn't the best and most fun time for sure. But I really did just kind of continue to feel out like what feels right to me, even if it doesn't seem like the thing I should be doing or the most traditional path. It will somehow work out, and just, I don't know, trust in that maybe. I don't know if it means much coming from a stranger on a webcam, but so that's what I leave you all with.
I would chime in and say that looking back at my college experience, one of my minors was outdoor recreation and education. So I went camping a lot for coursework, which was bizarre. But I think, and I always justified it as oh, well, I wanted to work in parks, so that makes sense. But if you're interested, if you want to take a pottery class, take a pottery class. I guess I so deeply believe that there is a piece of college that is preparing you for your career. But then, and this is, the well-rounded liberal arts student coming out in me, but if you have interests that you want to explore, the resources that you have in your undergraduate institution are not like the resources that you have in the rest of life, right? You are surrounded by brilliant people who are doing thinking about incredible thoughts, doing interesting research, and tap into whatever you find interesting. And it doesn't have to be justifiable as this is building my career, because college is about exploring all the random things that you find interesting, and that's worthwhile in and of itself.
Yes, if I could go back and give myself advice, I would just tell myself to be more confident, to not second guess myself. There were so many times where I thought, oh, I'll never get a job. It's the market, the economy is crashing. I guess I'll just try for this job at the FBI. I don't know. I probably won't even get an interview. And I landed it. And then when I first tested for the Foreign Service, I didn't feel like I would get in, but I did. And there's all these steps where I look back and I just wish I had a little more confidence and a little more, self wherewithal, something to show myself that I really was capable and really was there and I was serious. And I had a lot of goals in my life, and I think that's really important. So just encourage everyone to focus on those. And I think at first I sort of let myself, I wasn't that interested in criminal justice, but I got this FBI job and it seemed great. And in a way that worked out. I really learned a lot. I had fabulous colleagues. I had some great experiences. So also be willing to go with what comes your direction and remember that it's all going to get you where you want to go in the end. I mean, one of my goals was to get myself to the UN in New York, and that's where I'm headed when COVID's over, maybe. But, just the things that took me here, I never thought would take me here, but they still did. And I'm very happy about that. And I think that's just, remember, don't get lost in the minutia. The big picture will still work out. And if you just keep focused on your big dreams, you're going to get there.
Really appreciate all the advice today, and especially at the end. I feel like we live in a world that we're overly stressed about so many things going on, and just kind of embracing the ride. I tell everyone smiling's contagious. So, really balancing the adaptivity or like adaptability with, being productive, but just having fun. So thank you so much to each of the three of you. I encourage everyone to, connect with our speakers on LinkedIn. Stay in touch. If you're interested in another conversation, we have July 24th. We'll hear from speakers about human services and nonprofit focus. If you're interested in meeting with more fabulous professionals like today, we have the Wallin Wisdom Project that we encourage you to sign up for. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you. It looks like you're each typing your Gmail and email info below. Thank you. That is all I have. Have a great weekend, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks for your questions. Bye.